Elena's hands trembled as she reached for the stranger's half-eaten plate. But before her fingers touched the porcelain, the older woman's voice cut through the evening air like a blade. "Don't." Elena froze, her 5-month-old Sophia pressed against her chest, both of them holding their breath. This wasn't the first time someone had stopped her from taking leftovers, but something in this woman's steel-gray eyes was different. Not disgust, not pity, but recognition. What happened in the next 2 hours would crack open both their carefully guarded secrets and prove that sometimes the people who save us are the ones who need saving most. Drop a comment with your city name so I can see how far this story has traveled across America. The fork clattered against the plate louder than Elena intended. Margaret Chen looked up from her untouched salmon, and for 3 suspended seconds the two women stared at each other across the outdoor patio of the Riverside Bistro in downtown Chicago. It was 6:47 p.m. on a Thursday in late October, and the temperature had just dropped enough that most diners had moved inside, leaving only 4 occupied tables in the fading daylight. "I'm sorry," Elena said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't mean to disturb you. I just thought, since you weren't eating it, sit down." It wasn't a request. Margaret pushed the chair across from her with her foot, the metal leg scraping against concrete. Elena's pulse hammered in her throat. "I should go. I'm sorry for bothering." "You're not bothering me. You're starving. There's a difference." Margaret's tone was matter-of-fact, almost cold. "How long since you've eaten?" The question hung between them like a challenge. Sophia stirred against Elena's chest, making the small mewing sounds that meant she'd wake soon, hungry and crying. 2 days, Elena heard herself say. "But Sophia, the baby, she's been fed. I have formula. I'm not neglecting her." "I didn't ask about the baby. I asked about you." Something in Margaret's directness made Elena's knees weak. She hadn't sat down in hours, had been walking since noon, trying to look purposeful, trying not to look homeless, trying not to exist too visibly in spaces where people like her weren't welcome. She sat. Margaret raised one hand and a waiter appeared so quickly it seemed choreographed. "Bring another full order of the salmon special, and the French onion soup, and a pot of chamomile tea." She turned to Elena. "Allergies." "No, but I can't. You don't have to." "I'm not doing anything for you," Margaret said flatly. "I'm ordering food that I'm going to pay for at a restaurant where I've been a regular for 12 years. What you do with it after it arrives is your business." The waiter, a young man with kind eyes and a name tag that read Miguel, nodded and disappeared. Elena noticed he didn't look at her with the usual mixture of suspicion and discomfort she'd grown used to seeing in service workers' faces. "He's my nephew," Margaret said, as if reading her thoughts. "I own this restaurant. Well, my late husband and I opened it. Now it's just mine." Elena's hand instinctively moved to adjust Sophia's blanket. A pale yellow thing she'd knitted herself during her pregnancy, back when she'd still believed in futures and nurseries and baby showers that would actually happen. "I'm not looking for charity," Elena said quietly. "I have a job interview tomorrow, at the Hyatt. Housekeeping position. $7 an hour plus tips if I work the suites. I just need to get through tonight." "Where are you staying?" "There's a shelter on Madison Street, but..." Elena stopped pressing her lips together. "But what?" "They're full. They said come back Monday. There might be a bed then." Margaret's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind her eyes. Something Elena recognized, because she'd seen it in her own reflection in store windows and car mirrors. Rage. Not at Elena, but at something larger, something systematic, something that had broken both of them in different ways. "So where were you planning to sleep tonight?" Margaret asked. "There's a church that leaves their back entrance unlocked, St. Michael's on Clark. I stayed there 2 nights ago. It's warm and quiet and completely unsafe for a woman alone with an infant." Elena's jaw tightened. "I don't have a lot of options." "Now you do." Margaret pulled out her phone, typed something quickly, and set it face down on the table. "But first, you're going to eat, And you're going to tell me how a 20-something woman with no substance abuse issues, clear mental faculties, and obvious intelligence ends up asking strangers for leftovers. How do you know I don't have... Your hands don't shake except from hunger and adrenaline. Your eyes track normally. Your speech is coherent and grammatically correct, college education, I'd guess. And you still have all your teeth, which means you haven't been on the street long enough for malnutrition to set in. Margaret leaned back in her chair. I was a nurse for 34 years. Trauma unit at Northwestern. I've seen every kind of human damage there is, and I know the difference between someone who's fallen and someone who's been pushed. The food arrived, and Elena's hands trembled as she picked up the fork. The first bite of salmon nearly made her sob, the butter, the herbs, the way it melted against her tongue. She forced herself to chew slowly, to not inhale it like an animal, to maintain some shred of dignity. I was a nursing student, Elena said between bites. University of Illinois, Chicago, sophomore year, 3.7 GPA. I was going to specialize in pediatrics. What happened? I met Marcus. Elena took a sip of tea, letting the warmth spread through her chest. Junior year. He was God. He was everything I thought I wanted. Pre-med. Ambitious. Came from money. His family owned a chain of dental clinics in the suburbs. Margaret said nothing. Just watched Elena eat with the steady attention of someone who'd learned long ago that silence extracts truth better than questions. We dated for 8 months before I got pregnant. It wasn't planned, but I really thought he'd want to figure it out together. We'd talked about marriage, about futures. Elena's laugh was bitter. Turns out future meant a future where I didn't exist. His parents offered me $10,000 to have an abortion. When I refused, Marcus's father, a man I'd had dinner with who'd asked about my classes, told me I was trying to trap his son, that I was white trash trying to climb the social ladder through pregnancy. You're Latina, Margaret observed. My mother was. Mexican immigrant. Died when I was 16. Cancer. My father... Elena shook her head. I don't know where he is. He left when I was 8. Sophia began to fuss, and Elena automatically began the rocking motion that had become second nature, a constant gentle sway even when sitting still. Marcus paid the university to review my scholarship. Elena continued, her voice steady now, factual, as if she were reciting someone else's story. Found a technicality about enrollment status and family income reporting. I lost my financial aid, couldn't afford tuition, had to drop out. And housing. Student housing was tied to enrollment. I had 2 weeks to vacate. Elena finished the last of the salmon, and Miguel appeared again, as if summoned, placing a slice of chocolate cake on the table without a word. I tried to find work, but I was 7 months pregnant by then. Nobody hires obviously pregnant women for positions that require you to be on your feet. You could have sued. With what lawyer? What money? Marcus's family has attorneys on retainer. I had... Elena gestured at herself. This. Margaret was quiet for a long moment, her fingers drumming against the table in a rhythm that suggested she was working through calculations, assessing variables, making decisions. Sophia's 5 months old now, Margaret said. So you've been on the street since... 3 months. I stayed with a friend from school for the first 2 months after Sophia was born, but her roommate complained. Said the baby crying kept everyone awake. They weren't wrong. Elena looked down at Sophia's sleeping face. I tried the shelter system, but there aren't enough beds. I've been doing odd jobs cleaning houses for cash, standing in line for people who need to hold spots for new iPhone releases, that kind of thing. But it's not steady, and childcare costs more than I can make. The interview tomorrow, how did you get it? Pure luck. I was sitting outside the Hyatt nursing Sophia, and a woman came out on her break. She's a housekeeper there. We started talking and she told me they're short-staffed. Said if I could show up looking clean and sober, they'd hire me on the spot. Elena met Margaret's eyes. I have one outfit that still looks professional. I washed it in the church bathroom yesterday. If I can just get through tonight without it getting dirty or stolen, I can make that interview. And if I can get that job, I can start saving for a deposit on a room. There are places that rent by the week if you have cash up front. Where's Sophia going to be while you're working? The question landed like a punch. Elena's careful architecture of hope. The interview, the job, the room collapsed into the same impossible logistics that had been strangling her for months. I'll figure something out, she said, but her voice cracked on the last word. Margaret stood up abruptly, pulling cash from her wallet and placing it on the table, far more than the meal cost. Miguel will pack up the rest of this for you. Come with me. Where? I'm not going to hurt you, and I'm not going to call the police or social services. But we're not having the rest of this conversation here. Margaret was already walking toward the restaurant entrance, her stride purposeful, assuming Elena would follow. Elena looked down at Sophia, at the packed food Miguel was already bagging at the chocolate cake she'd barely touched. Every survival instinct she'd developed over the past 3 months screamed at her to run, to not trust, to protect Sophia above all else. But something in Margaret's fury that controlled, directed rage felt familiar, felt safe, felt like recognition. She followed. Margaret's car was a silver Volvo Practical and well-maintained, parked in a reserved spot behind the restaurant. She unlocked it without ceremony and gestured for Elena to get in. Where are we going? Elena asked, strapping Sophia's car seat, a donation from the shelter, into the back. Somewhere we can talk without an audience. Margaret started the engine. And somewhere you and that baby can sleep tonight that isn't a church with an unlocked door. They drove in silence through downtown Chicago, the evening traffic thinning as they headed north. Elena watched the familiar streets slide past places she used to know as a student coffee shops, where she'd studied bookstores, where she'd browsed all of it feeling like artifacts from someone else's life. Margaret's building was in Lincoln Park, a quiet residential area, with tree-lined streets and renovated brownstones. She pulled into an underground garage and led Elena to an elevator without speaking. The apartment was on the 6th floor, and when Margaret opened the door, Elena stepped into a space that felt frozen in time. Dark wood furniture, family photos in silver frames, bookshelves packed with medical texts and novels, a piano in the corner with sheet music still open on the stand. Bathrooms down the hall, Margaret said, setting her keys in a ceramic dish by the door. Clean towels in the cabinet. There's a bedroom on the right, used to be my son's. The sheets are clean. You can sleep there tonight. Elena stood in the entryway. Sophia still pressed against her chest, unable to process the sudden shift from street to safety. Why are you doing this? She asked. Margaret walked to the kitchen and filled a kettle with water. Because 37 years ago, I was you. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. I was 26. Margaret continued, her back to Elena as she set the kettle on the stove. Nursing school just like you. Got pregnant by a man who promised me everything and delivered nothing. His family, wealthy Chinese immigrants, very traditional. They offered me money to disappear, to abort or to have the baby and give it up for adoption and never contact their son again. Elena sat down slowly on the couch, Sophia sleeping peacefully against her chest. I kept the baby. My son Daniel dropped out of school. Worked 3 jobs waitressing cleaning offices at night, doing medical transcription from home during the day. It was... Margaret's voice caught. It was the hardest 5 years of my life. But I survived it. Got back to school part-time. Finished my degree when Daniel was 6. Became a trauma nurse. Eventually met my husband Robert when Daniel was 8. He adopted Daniel. We built a life. Where's Daniel now? Elena asked softly. Margaret turned and Elena saw tears tracking down her face, though her expression remained controlled. He died 3 years ago. Car accident. He was 34. Had just finished his residency in emergency medicine. Was about to start his first attending position at the hospital where I'd worked my entire career. Margaret's voice was steady despite the tears. And my husband Robert died 2 years after that. Heart attack. So now it's just me in this apartment with all these rooms full of ghosts. Sophia stirred, making soft sounds, and Elena automatically began rocking again. I see them everywhere I look. Margaret continued. Daniel at the piano learning to play Chopin. Robert reading the paper in that chair by the window. All these moments I can remember, but can't touch anymore. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. I kept working after Robert died. Thought the structure would help. But last year I retired. 65 years old, nothing to do but run a restaurant and rattle around this apartment alone. I'm sorry, Elena whispered. Don't be sorry, be angry. Margaret's voice hardened. Be furious that in one of the wealthiest countries in the world, a smart young woman with a baby has to beg for leftovers. Be enraged that the system is designed to punish people, especially women, for choosing to keep their children. Be livid that nothing has changed in 40 years, that I went through this, and now you're going through it, and there's probably some other terrified mother out there right now going through the same thing. Elena felt something crack open in her chest, some dam she'd been holding against the flood of everything she'd been refusing to feel. The fear, the exhaustion, the bone-deep unfairness of it all. I'm so tired, she said, and her voice broke completely. I'm so tired of being strong. I'm so tired of pretending Sophia and I are going to be okay when I don't know where we're sleeping tomorrow, or if I can keep her safe, or if I'm completely screwing up her entire life by not giving her up to a family that could actually take care of her. Stop. Margaret sat down beside her. You are taking care of her. You're keeping her fed, clean, safe. You're not using drugs or alcohol to escape. You're still fighting for a future. That's not screwing up. That's love. Sophia woke fully, then beginning to cry, and Elena automatically reached for the diaper bag she'd been carrying, pulling out a bottle of formula she'd mixed hours ago. Margaret watched as Elena fed Sophia with practiced efficiency, the baby's cries quieting immediately as she latched onto the bottle. Tomorrow, Margaret said, you're going to that interview, and you're going to get that job, but you're not going to be solving the childcare problem by yourself. I don't understand. My restaurant needs staff. Miguel is good, but he's in school, can only work evenings. I need someone who can work mornings, prep work, inventory, helping with the lunch rush. Margaret's eyes were sharp, calculating. It's minimum wage plus tips, but you'd be working where I can see you, where I can vouch for you. And upstairs from the restaurant there are 2 apartments. One rents commercially. The other one, the smaller one, has been storage for years. I can clean it out. Elena's heart began to pound. I can't afford rent on minimum wage. You work for me mornings. You work at the Hyatt evenings. I'll watch Sophia while you're at the hotel job. The offer was so staggering, so impossible, that Elena couldn't process it. Why would you do this? She asked again. Because nobody did it for me, Margaret said simply. Because I spent 5 years drowning, and I swore that if I ever had the chance to throw someone else a rope, I would. Because Daniel would have wanted me to. Because maybe this is how I start living again, instead of just existing. Sophia finished her bottle, and Elena lifted her to burp her the automatic motions, allowing her time to think, to try to find the trap, the catch, the ulterior motive. What do you want from me? Elena asked finally. I want you to survive, Margaret said. I want that baby to have a chance. And selfishly, I want to not feel useless. I want to matter again. To someone. For something. They sat in silence for a long moment, Sophia making contented sounds against Elena's shoulder. Okay, Elena whispered. Okay. Yes, thank you. Yes. Margaret nodded once, brisk and businesslike again. Good. Now go shower. There's a washer and dryer in the closet by the bathroom. Wash your interview outfit. I'll make up the bed in Daniel's room. Elena stood still holding Sophia and walked down the hallway. In the bathroom, she caught sight of herself in the mirror. Hollow-eyed, thin, her hair lank and unwashed. She looked like someone who'd been through a war. She turned on the shower and stepped under the hot water, fully clothed, at first letting it soak through her clothes before peeling them off and washing them in the shower with her. Sophia, she'd already bathed at the church yesterday, but she held her daughter under the warm spray anyway. Both of them crying now. Both of them clean. Both of them for the first time in months, safe. When she emerged, wrapped in a towel with Sophia bundled in, another, Margaret was waiting in the hallway with a t-shirt and sweatpants. "They were Daniel's," she said. "They'll be too big, but they're clean and warm." Elena took them without speaking, too overwhelmed for words. In Daniel's room, she found a bed made up with fresh sheets, a lamp on the nightside table casting soft light, and a glass of water waiting. The room was simply decorated a few framed photos, some books, a degree on the wall from Northwestern University, Feinberg School of Medicine. Elena laid Sophia in the center of the bed, surrounding her with pillows, and then collapsed beside her daughter. Her body ached in the way that comes from finally being allowed to stop running. She heard Margaret's footsteps pause outside the door. "Elena." "Yes." "You're going to make it," Margaret said through the closed door. "You're going to make it because I made it, and you're stronger than I was." Elena stared at the ceiling, holding Sophia's tiny hand, and for the first time in 3 months, she let herself believe it might be true. Elena woke to the sound of Sophia crying and sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows. For 3 disorienting seconds, she couldn't remember where she was. The softness of the mattress beneath her, the clean smell of detergent, the warmth that didn't come from huddling in corners or pressing against heating vents. Then memory crashed back, and with it a spike of panic that this had all been a dream, that she'd wake up on the church steps with nothing changed. But Sophia was real and crying, and the room around her was still Daniel's room, and she could hear movement in the kitchen down the hall. She changed Sophia's diaper with hands that trembled from something other than hunger for the first time in weeks, then wrapped her daughter in the yellow blanket and padded barefoot toward the kitchen. Margaret stood at the stove scrambling eggs, still wearing what looked like the same clothes from last night. She glanced up when Elena entered. "Coffee's on the counter. Mugs in the cabinet above. She take formula, or are you nursing tea?" "Formula," Elena said, her voice rough with sleep. "I dried up about 6 weeks ago. Not enough calories to sustain it." Margaret nodded and gestured toward the refrigerator. "I sent Miguel out at 6 this morning. There's formula in there, the kind the hospital recommends. Also, milk juice, bread, eggs, fruit. He said you looked like you weighed about 115, so you need to be eating 4,000 calories a day, minimum for the next month, to get your strength back." Elena opened the refrigerator and stared at the contents, her throat tight. The formula alone, the name brand kind, not the generic, represented more money than she'd had at one time in 3 months. "I'll pay you back," she said. "You'll do no such thing. Sit down and eat." Elena prepared Sophia's bottle on autopilot, then sat at the small kitchen table while the baby drank. Margaret slid a plate in front of her: scrambled eggs, toast, sliced strawberries, a glass of orange juice. "Eat," Margaret said again, sitting across from her with her own plate. "You have an interview in 3 hours. You need protein and carbohydrates, not nerves and adrenaline." Elena ate, and the food tasted like absolution. They ate in silence for several minutes before Margaret spoke again. "Tell me about Marcus." Elena's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. "Why?" "Because he's Sophia's father, which means he's legally obligated to provide support, and because I want to know if he's dangerous." "He's not. I mean, he never hit me or anything. He just..." Elena set down her fork. "He made me invisible. Once his parents decided I was a problem, it was like I ceased to exist. He blocked my number. His family had their lawyers send me a cease and desist letter threatening harassment charges if I tried to contact him again. When I showed up at his apartment to tell him I'd had the baby, that I'd named her Sophia, he looked at me like I was a stranger asking for directions." Margaret's jaw tightened. "And you haven't pursued child support because..." "Because I don't have a permanent address. Because the family court system requires documentation I don't have. Because his family has money and lawyers and I have nothing." Elena's voice cracked. "Because I was terrified they'd use my homelessness as grounds to take Sophia away from me. That they'd say I'm unfit, that she deserves better, and they'd give her to some family who has a house and money and stability, and I'd never see her again." "That's not how it works," Margaret said firmly. "Not in Illinois. Not anymore. But you're right that you need stability first before you can fight that battle. Sophia finished her bottle, and Elena lifted her to burp the repetitive patting motion, soothing to both of them. The interview, Margaret said, switching gears. What's the hiring manager's name? I don't know. The woman I met yesterday, Teresa, she just said to show up at 10 and ask for the housekeeping supervisor. Margaret pulled out her phone and typed something quickly. I know the GM at that Hyatt, Richard Nakamura. We served on a hospitality board together years ago. I'm sending him a text. Please don't, Elena said quickly. I need to do this on my own. I can't if I get the job because you called in a favor. I'll always wonder if I actually earned it. Margaret looked at her for a long moment, then nodded and set down her phone. Fair enough, but I'm not letting you walk in there looking like you've been sleeping on the street. I have my clean outfit, which I'm sure is perfectly professional, but you also need a coat. It's 43 degrees outside, and you've been walking around in a hoodie. Margaret stood and walked toward what Elena assumed was her bedroom. And you need a bag that doesn't look like it came from a donation bin. She returned with a black wool coat, simple and well-made, and a leather purse that looked expensive but understated. These were mine. The coat I haven't worn in 2 years. The bag I stopped using when Robert died, he gave it to me, and it felt wrong to carry it after. Elena stood holding Sophia against her shoulder. I can't take these. You're not taking them. You're borrowing them. There's a difference. Margaret held out the coat. Try it on. It fit almost perfectly, a little loose in the shoulders, but warm and professional. Elena caught sight of herself in the hallway mirror and barely recognized the woman looking back clean put together, like someone who had their life under control. Better, Margaret said approvingly. Now let's talk about Sophia. Elena's arms tightened automatically around her daughter. What about her? You can't bring her to the interview. I'm assuming you know this. I was going to. Elena stopped realizing she'd been planning to ask Teresa to watch Sophia during the interview, but that she'd never actually confirmed this, that it was just desperate hope masquerading as a plan. I'll figure something out. You don't have to figure anything out. I'm watching her. You barely know me. I know enough. Margaret's voice was firm. I know you love that baby. I know you're not on drugs. I know you're not going to steal from me and disappear, because you need this stability more than you need whatever you could pawn from this apartment. And I know that Sophia will be perfectly safe with a woman who spent 34 years keeping people alive in a trauma unit. Elena wanted to argue, wanted to maintain some independence, some control, but the truth was, she had no other option, and they both knew it. Okay, she whispered. Thank you. Stop thanking me. We're past that now. Margaret glanced at the clock on the microwave. You have 2.5 hours. Go take another shower. Do your hair properly. There's makeup in the bathroom cabinet if you want it. Nothing fancy, just the basics. I want you walking into that hotel, looking like someone they'd be lucky to hire, not someone they're doing a favor for. Elena handed Sophia to Margaret, the first time she'd let anyone else hold her daughter in weeks, and watched as the older woman settled the baby against her shoulder with the practiced ease of someone who'd done this before. Go, Margaret said. We'll be fine. In the bathroom, Elena showered again, taking time to actually wash her hair twice to shave her legs to scrub her skin until it felt like hers again. She used Margaret's moisturizer, a small amount of concealer for the dark circles under her eyes, a touch of mascara and lip gloss. When she emerged and dressed in her interview outfit, a simple black skirt and white blouse she'd protected like armor, she looked almost like the person she'd been 18 months ago. Margaret appeared in the bedroom doorway with Sophia, who was clean and content in a fresh onesie. Where did that come from? Elena asked, gesturing at the clothing. Miguel. I texted him the baby size. He stopped at Target this morning. Margaret's tone was matter-of-fact. She can't wear the same outfit every day. Elena felt tears threatening again and forced them back. I really will pay you back for all of this. Once I start working, you'll pay it forward. Margaret interrupted. That's the deal. Someday when you're stable and Sophia's older and you have resources, you'll help someone else who's where you are now. That's how this works. At 9:30, Margaret drove Elena to the Hyatt Sophia, secured in the borrowed car seat in the back. "You have my number in your phone," Margaret said as they pulled up to the hotel entrance. "Call me when you're done. I don't care if it's good news or bad news, you call me, and I'll come get you." Elena nodded, unable to speak around the tightness in her throat. "And, Elena," Margaret caught her arm before she could get out of the car. "You deserve this job. Not because you need it, but because you'll be good at it. Remember that." The hotel lobby was elegant in a corporate way, all polished marble and carefully arranged furniture. Elena approached the front desk, her heart hammering. "I'm here for an interview. Housekeeping position. I'm supposed to ask for the supervisor." The desk clerk, a young woman with kind eyes, smiled. "You must be Elena. Teresa told us to expect you. I'll call down to housekeeping." Within 5 minutes, a woman in her 40s appeared wearing the hotel's uniform and an expression of professional assessment. "Elena Rodriguez, I'm Diane Chin, housekeeping manager. Teresa spoke highly of you. Come with me." They walked through the back corridors of the hotel, away from the polished guest areas, into the functional spaces where the real work happened. Diane led her to a small office and gestured for her to sit. "Teresa says you need work and you need it badly. That true?" Elena met her eyes directly. "Yes, ma'am. I have a baby, 5 months old. I'm staying with a friend right now, but I need steady income to get my own place. Childcare situation. Arranged. My friend will watch her during my shifts." Diane nodded, making notes on a form. "Previous experience in hospitality." "No, ma'am, but I worked as a waitress through high school and part of college. I'm used to being on my feet, working quickly, paying attention to detail." "College?" Elena hesitated, then decided on honesty. "I was in nursing school, University of Illinois, Chicago. Had to drop out when I got pregnant. I plan to go back someday." Something shifted in Diane's expression. "Nursing school, that's good. Shows you can handle training, follow procedures, maintain hygiene standards." She set down her pen. "I'm going to be straight with you, Elena. This job is hard. You'll be on your feet for 8-hour shifts. You'll clean things most people don't want to think about. Guests can be demanding, sometimes rude. The pay is $7.50 an hour plus tips, if you work the suites, which average out to maybe another $2 an hour if you're lucky." "I'll take it," Elena said immediately. Diane allowed a small smile. "Don't you want to know the schedule first? I'll work whatever schedule you give me. Even split shifts, even weekends and holidays." "Yes, ma'am." Diane studied her for a long moment. "I started in housekeeping 23 years ago. Single mother, 2 kids. Nobody wanted to hire me because I had no experience and needed flexible hours. Someone took a chance on me anyway. Now I'm the housekeeping manager for a 300-room hotel." She stood and extended her hand. "Welcome to the Hyatt, Elena. You start Monday morning at 6 a.m., 3 days training, then you're on the floor." Elena shook her hand, and it took everything she had not to cry. "Thank you. You won't regret this." "Make sure I don't." Diane's voice was firm, but not unkind. "Show up on time, work hard, follow the rules, and we'll get along fine. Show up late, cut corners, or give me attitude, and you're gone. Clear. Crystal clear. Good. Come by Friday at 2 p.m. for your uniform fitting and orientation paperwork. You'll need 2 forms of ID and your social security card." Elena's stomach dropped. "I have my ID and social security card, but for the second form of ID, I don't have a current utility bill or lease agreement." Diane frowned. "Bank statement?" "No, ma'am." "Pay stub from previous employment?" "No, ma'am." Diane sighed. "This is going to be a problem, Elena. Corporate requires 2 forms of ID for the I-9 form. I can't hire you without it." Elena felt the fragile hope she'd been building begin to crumble. What if the person I'm staying with writes a letter confirming my address? That's not an official document. It won't satisfy the requirement. Diane tapped her pen against the desk, thinking. "Do you have a birth certificate?" "Yes, and Sophia's birth certificate too. That works. Birth certificate counts as a List C document, combined with your ID that satisfies the requirement. Diane made a note on her form. Bring both certificates Friday. Make copies before you come. I'll need copies for the file. Elena nodded, relief flooding through her. I'll be here, Friday at 2, I promise. Outside the hotel, Elena called Margaret with shaking hands. I got it. I start Monday. Of course you did. Margaret's voice was warm. Where are you? Front entrance. Stay there. I'll circle around. In the car, Sophia was sleeping peacefully in her car seat. Elena climbed into the passenger seat and finally let herself cry huge, gasping sobs of relief and gratitude and exhaustion. Margaret reached over and squeezed her hand. Let it out. You've earned it. They drove back to the restaurant in silence. When they arrived, Margaret led Elena upstairs to the apartment above the dining room, a small space, maybe 500 square feet, with one bedroom, a tiny bathroom, and a combined kitchen and living area. It needs cleaning, Margaret said, surveying the boxes and old equipment stacked against the walls. But the plumbing works, the heat works, and it's structurally sound. Miguel and I can clear it out this weekend. Have it ready for you by Monday. Elena walked through the space, imagining Sophia's crib in the bedroom corner, imagining cooking dinner in the small kitchen, imagining a life that looked almost normal. What's the rent? She asked quietly. $300 a month, utilities included. Below market, but this building is paid off and I don't need the income. I need reliable staff and you need affordable housing. We're solving problems for each other. $300. On $7.50 an hour, working 40 hours a week, she'd clear maybe $900 after taxes. Minus $300 for rent, that left $600 for food, formula, diapers, transportation, saving for eventually getting Sophia proper childcare so she could work more hours. It was barely enough, but it was possible. For the first time in 3 months, survival felt possible. When can I start working here? Elena asked. Tomorrow if you want. Morning shift 6 a.m. to noon. You'll do prep work, help with inventory, cover the counter during breakfast rush. Then you can rest in the afternoon before your evening shift at the Hyatt starts Monday. I don't start at the Hyatt until Monday. I know, but you start here tomorrow. You need to build routine. Need to remember what it feels like to work, to be responsible to someone other than Sophia. And you need the money. Elena nodded. Tomorrow. 6 a.m. I'll be here. That night, back in Daniel's room, Elena lay awake long after Sophia had fallen asleep. She could hear Margaret moving around the apartment, the quiet sounds of someone who'd grown used to living alone. At some point she heard piano music, hesitant and rusty, like someone remembering how to play. She got up carefully, leaving Sophia surrounded by pillows, and padded down the hallway. Margaret sat at the piano, her fingers moving slowly over the keys, playing something classical and melancholic. Did I wake you? Margaret asked without turning around. No, I couldn't sleep. Elena sat on the couch nearby. What are you playing? Chopin. Nocturne in E-flat major. Daniel used to play it. Margaret's fingers stumbled over a chord and she stopped, her hands falling to her lap. I haven't touched this piano since he died. Couldn't bear to. Why tonight? Margaret was quiet for a long moment. Because having you and Sophia here makes the apartment feel less like a museum, less like I'm just a curator of my own dead life. She turned to face Elena. I meant what I said last night. You're not a charity case. You're giving me something too. A sense of purpose. A reason to keep the piano, Margaret said simply. A reason to make breakfast. A reason to care if I'm here tomorrow. Elena understood then that they were both survivors of different kinds of losses, both trying to figure out how to keep living when the life they'd planned had been ripped away. Play it again, Elena said softly. The Chopin. I'd like to hear it. Margaret turned back to the piano and began again, her fingers more confident this time. Elena closed her eyes and listened, thinking about Daniel learning this piece about Robert listening from that chair by the window, about all the ways love persists, even after the people we love are gone. When the music ended, Margaret spoke without turning around. Tomorrow you start building your life back. It won't be easy. There will be days you want to quit, days you can't see the point, days when Sophia is screaming and you're exhausted and the walls are closing in. I know. But you'll get through them, because you're stronger than you think, because Sophia needs you, and because I'll be here reminding you that you've survived worse. Elena went back to bed and pulled Sophia close, breathing in her baby smell, feeling the small heartbeat against her chest. For the first time since that terrible day in Marcus's father's office, when they'd offered her money to disappear, Elena let herself imagine a future that didn't involve constant fear. She imagined Sophia's first birthday, imagined her taking first steps in the small apartment above the restaurant. Imagined eventually saving enough to go back to school part-time. Imagined becoming a nurse like she'd always planned, like Margaret had done. Imagined one day being the person who pulled someone else out of the dark. The path forward was still narrow and precarious, still one missed shift or one emergency away from collapse. But it was a path. It existed. And tomorrow, she'd take the first real step along it. She fell asleep with Margaret's words echoing in her mind. You'll get through this because I'll be here. For the first time in 3 months, Elena believed it might actually be true. The alarm on Margaret's phone went off at 5:30 the next morning, and Elena was already awake, had been for an hour. Sophia fed and changed and content in her arms. She'd laid out her clothes the night before, jeans and a clean t-shirt Margaret had given her, nothing fancy, but appropriate for kitchen work. Margaret appeared in the doorway already dressed. You didn't have to get up this early. I would have woken you. Couldn't sleep. Too nervous. Good nervous or bad nervous? Elena considered this. Both. I keep thinking I'm going to mess something up that you'll realize you made a mistake. I don't make mistakes about people, Margaret said. Come on, we need to feed you before we go. They ate breakfast quickly, Margaret moving through her kitchen with the efficiency of someone who'd spent decades working under pressure. She scrambled eggs while simultaneously brewing coffee and toasting bread, her movements economical and precise. When we get to the restaurant, Margaret said, Miguel will show you the prep routine, chopping vegetables, making stocks, portioning ingredients. Nothing complicated, but it needs to be done right. He's worked there for 3 years, knows the system inside out. What if he resents me, taking a job he might have wanted to give to someone else? Margaret shook her head. Miguel doesn't work that way. He's studying engineering at Northwestern, only works evenings because of his class schedule. He'll be glad to have help. They drove to the restaurant in the pre-dawn darkness, Sophia asleep in her car seat. The streets were nearly empty, just a few delivery trucks and early commuters. Margaret pulled into the alley behind the building and unlocked the back door, and Elena followed her into the kitchen. The space was industrial and spotless, all stainless steel and white tile. Margaret flipped on the lights and began her own morning routine, checking the walk-in refrigerator, reviewing the reservation list, making notes on a clipboard. Sophia can stay in the office, Margaret said, leading Elena to a small room off the kitchen. There's a portable crib I had Miguel set up yesterday. She'll be safe there, and you can check on her between tasks. Elena settled Sophia in the crib surrounded by blankets, and the baby immediately fell back asleep. She stood there for a moment watching her daughter breathe, still unable to believe this was real. Miguel arrived at 6:15, letting himself in through the back door with his own key. He was younger than Elena had expected, maybe 22, with an easy smile and oil-stained fingers that suggested he'd been working on something mechanical before his shift. You must be Elena, he said, extending his hand. Tia Margaret told me about you. Tia? My aunt. Well, great-aunt technically. My grandmother's sister. Miguel grinned. She acts all tough, but she's a softie. She just hides it well. I heard that, Margaret called from the office. Miguel laughed and pulled an apron from a hook, tossing one to Elena. Come on, I'll show you the morning routine. It's not hard, just repetitive. The secret is to find a rhythm and stick to it. He taught her how to break down whole chickens for the day's lunch service, how to julienne, vegetables for the soup, how to portion butter and measure spices for the various dishes. His teaching style was patient and clear, and Elena found herself relaxing into the work, her hands remembering skills she'd learned years ago in the diner where she'd worked through high school. "You've done kitchen work before," Miguel observed, watching her knife technique. "Waitressing mostly. But I picked up some prep skills. The cook at the diner I worked at used to let me help when it was slow." "You're good. Clean cuts, consistent sizes. That matters more than people think." He glanced toward the office. "Tia told me a little about your situation, that you've been on the street." Elena's hands stilled on the cutting board. "Yeah. My mom was homeless for a while. When she first came from Mexico before she met my dad. She was 17, pregnant with my oldest brother, didn't speak English. She slept in a laundromat for 2 months." Miguel's voice was matter-of-fact, without pity. "She always says those 2 months taught her more about survival than the rest of her life combined." Is she okay now?" "She owns 3 laundromats in Pilsen. My dad runs a auto body shop. They're doing good." Miguel smiled. "I'm telling you this because I want you to know that Tia Margaret helping you isn't charity. It's just how our family works. Someone helped my mom when she needed it, so my parents help other people. Tia Margaret helped my parents when my oldest brother needed surgery they couldn't afford. So now I work here and learn from her. It's a circle, you know. You take the help now and someday you pass it on." Elena nodded, unable to speak around the lump in her throat. They worked in companionable silence for a while, the rhythm of chopping and measuring almost meditative. Sophia woke around 8 and began to fuss, and Margaret appeared from the office with the baby, before Elena could even set down her knife. "Keep working," Margaret said. "I've got her." Elena watched as Margaret prepared a bottle, with one hand supporting Sophia, with the other moving through the kitchen like she'd been doing this forever. The older woman settled into a chair near the prep station and fed Sophia while simultaneously reviewing invoices, and Elena felt something shift in her chest, the realization that she wasn't alone anymore, that she had help, that asking for that help didn't make her weak. The breakfast rush started at 8:30, and Elena found herself moved to the front counter, helping take orders and pour coffee, while Miguel manned the kitchen. The regulars came in one by one, and Margaret introduced Elena simply as "my new assistant," not explaining anything more, giving Elena the dignity of being staff rather than a project. An older man in a business suit ordered the breakfast special and smiled at Elena. "You're new. What happened to Sandra?" "She retired last month," Margaret said smoothly. "Elena's taking over the morning shift." "Well, welcome aboard. Margaret runs the best breakfast spot in Lincoln Park. You'll learn a lot here." By noon, when the lunch rush had ended and Miguel left for his afternoon classes, Elena's feet ached and her back was sore, but she felt more alive than she had in months. She'd earned this exhaustion through work, through contributing, through being useful. Margaret locked the front door and flipped the sign to closed. The restaurant didn't do dinner service, just breakfast and lunch 6 days a week. "You did well," Margaret said, counting out the cash drawer. "Better than well, actually. You're a natural with customers." "I liked it," Elena admitted. "Liked feeling like I was part of something." "Good, because starting Monday you're working here 6 days a week, mornings only. That gives you time with Sophia in the afternoon before your evening shifts at the Hyatt." Margaret handed Elena an envelope. "Your first day's pay, $60. Tomorrow you'll get another 60, and so on." Elena stared at the envelope, at the cash inside. "I only worked 6 hours. At $10 an hour. That's what the position pays." "But you said minimum wage." "I say a lot of things. Take the money, Elena. Buy diapers. Buy yourself some proper work shoes. Save the rest." That afternoon, Elena walked to the Target 3 blocks from Margaret's apartment, Sophia strapped to her chest in a carrier Margaret had also mysteriously produced. She bought diapers formula, a package of onesies, and a pair of non-slip work shoes. The total came to $47, and she had 13 left over, which she tucked into her wallet like treasure. On the walk back, she passed a playground where mothers pushed toddlers on swings and helped them navigate climbing structures. She paused to watch, imagining Sophia at that age, imagining a life stable enough that playground visits were routine rather than impossible dreams. "She'll get there," an older woman said, appearing beside Elena. The woman was maybe 70 with silver hair and kind eyes. "Your baby. She'll be running around before you know it." "I hope so," Elena said softly. "First child." "Yes." "Hardest job in the world. Most important too." The woman smiled. "I raised 4, all grown now with kids of their own. Sometimes I miss those early days when they were small enough to hold. Even though it was hard. Especially because it was hard, that's when you learn what you're made of." The woman patted Elena's arm. "You're doing fine, honey. I can tell." Elena wanted to ask how she could tell what visible evidence suggested competence rather than desperation, but the woman had already moved on, heading toward the playground where a small boy was calling for his grandmother. Back at Margaret's apartment, Elena found a note on the kitchen table. "Gone to meet with restaurant suppliers. Help yourself to anything in the fridge. Back by 5. Elena fed Sophia and put her down for a nap, then stood in Margaret's living room, uncertain what to do with unstructured time. For 3 months, every moment had been consumed with survival, finding food, finding shelter, staying safe, keeping Sophia alive. Now, with those immediate pressures temporarily lifted, she didn't know how to simply exist. She found herself drawn to the bookshelves, running her fingers over the spines. Medical texts, novels, biographies, a whole section on grief and loss. She pulled out a book called The Year of Magical Thinking by Joan Didion and sank into the couch. She was 40 pages in when her phone rang, the prepaid phone Margaret had given her that morning, with the explanation that, "You need to be reachable for work." The number was unfamiliar. "Hello? Elena Rodriguez." A woman's voice, professional and clipped. "Yes. This is Amanda Foster from the Illinois Department of Children and Family Services. I'm calling regarding a report we received about your daughter, Sophia Rodriguez." Elena's entire body went cold. "What report?" "We received an anonymous tip that you've been homeless with an infant, that the child may be at risk. I need to schedule a home visit to assess the situation." "Who called you?" Elena's voice was shaking. "I have housing now. I have a job. Sophia is fine. She's safe." "I understand this is stressful, Ms. Rodriguez, but the report has been filed and I'm required to follow up. Can you provide me with your current address?" Elena's mind raced. If she gave Margaret's address, would they think she was lying about having her own place? If she gave the restaurant address, would they find out the apartment wasn't ready yet? If she refused to cooperate, would they take Sophia immediately? "Ms. Rodriguez, are you still there?" "I'm staying with a friend temporarily. I start my own apartment on Monday. I have a job, 2 jobs. I'm getting back on my feet." "That's good to hear, but I still need to conduct a home visit. Can you give me the address where you're currently staying?" Elena heard a key in the door, and Margaret walked in carrying grocery bags. She took one look at Elena's face and set down the bags immediately. "What's wrong?" Elena couldn't speak, just held out the phone. Margaret took it. "This is Margaret Chen. Who is this?" She listened for a moment, her expression hardening. "I see. And when was this report filed?" Another pause. "Yesterday evening. How convenient." Her voice turned icy. "Ms. Foster, I'm a registered nurse with 34 years of experience in trauma care. Elena Rodriguez and her daughter are staying with me temporarily, while Elena transitions into permanent housing. The baby is healthy, well-fed, and receiving excellent care. If you need to conduct a home visit, I'll be present for it. When can you come?" They scheduled the visit for the following afternoon. When Margaret hung up, she handed the phone back to Elena with a grim expression. "Someone called DCFS on you. The report was filed yesterday evening." "But I was with you yesterday evening." "Sophia was safe. She was fed and clean and—" Elena stopped understanding dawning. Marcus. Your ex? Or his family? They must have hired someone to follow me to see where I went after I left the hotel. They probably watched me go into your building with Sophia. Elena's voice was rising, panic flooding through her. They're going to take her. They're going to say I'm unfit, that I can't provide for her, and they're going to take her. They're not taking anyone, Margaret said firmly. Listen to me, Elena. I've dealt with DCFS dozens of times over my career. They're not looking to separate families unless there's actual abuse or neglect. What they'll see tomorrow is a baby who's healthy and loved, living temporarily with a responsible adult who has the means to provide care. But I was homeless for 3 months. They'll use that against me. You were homeless, past tense. You're not anymore. And you were homeless because you fled an abusive situation and lost your financial support, not because of addiction or mental illness or criminal activity. Margaret's voice was steady, anchoring. Tomorrow, when the caseworker comes, Sophia will be clean and fed. You'll be calm and cooperative. I'll be here as a character witness. We'll show them that you're doing everything right. What if it's not enough? Margaret was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke again, her voice was softer. Then we fight. We get you a lawyer. We document everything. We build a case. But Elena, I don't think it will come to that. I think Marcus's family is trying to scare you, to destabilize you. Don't let them. That night, Elena barely slept. She held Sophia close, memorizing the weight of her daughter's body, the smell of her hair, the small sounds she made while dreaming. She thought about Marcus and his family, about how power worked, about how easily people with money could weaponize systems against people without it. But she also thought about Margaret, about Miguel, about Diane at the Hyatt, who'd given her a chance. About Teresa, the housekeeper, who'd suggested the interview. About all the small acts of solidarity that had brought her to this moment. The caseworker arrived at 2:30 the next afternoon. Amanda Foster was younger than Elena had expected, maybe 35, with a tired expression that suggested she'd seen too much human suffering already that week. Margaret had spent the morning coaching Elena on how to respond to questions, honest but not defensive, factual, without over-explaining, focused on the present and future rather than dwelling on the past. Amanda sat on the couch and pulled out a tablet. Ms. Rodriguez, I need to ask you some questions. Please understand that this is just protocol. I'm not here to judge you. I'm here to ensure Sophia's safety. I understand, Elena said, keeping her voice steady. Can you tell me about your current living situation? I'm temporarily staying with Margaret Chen while I transition into my own apartment. I start a permanent rental on Monday above the restaurant where I work. And your employment. I work mornings at the Riverside Bistro, Margaret's restaurant. I also start an evening position at the Hyatt downtown on Monday, housekeeping. Childcare arrangements while you're working. Margaret watches Sophia during my evening shifts. During my morning shifts, Sophia is with me at the restaurant. Margaret has set up a safe space for her in the office. Amanda made notes on her tablet. Can I see Sophia? Elena brought her daughter from the bedroom, where she'd just woken from a nap. Amanda conducted a brief physical assessment, checking Sophia's weight, looking for any signs of neglect or abuse, observing how Elena handled the baby. She's healthy, Amanda said finally. Good weight, no signs of malnutrition or physical harm. How are you feeling mentally and emotionally? Ms. Rodriguez's postpartum period can be difficult, especially under stress. I'm managing. Some days are harder than others, but I'm not depressed. I'm not having thoughts of hurting myself or Sophia. I'm just trying to build a stable life for us. Support system besides Ms. Chen? Not really. My mother is deceased. I don't have contact with Sophia's father or his family. About that, Amanda said carefully. The report we received suggested that Sophia's father might be willing to provide support if given the opportunity. Have you pursued child support? Elena's jaw tightened. Sophia's father made it clear he wants nothing to do with us. His family threatened me with legal action if I contacted them again. I have the cease and desist letter if you need to see it." "That would be helpful, yes." Margaret left the room and returned with a folder. "I have copies of all relevant documentation. The cease and desist letter from the family's attorney, the letter from UIC explaining the termination of Elena's scholarship, her birth certificate, Sophia's birth certificate, and her employment contracts from both the restaurant and the Hyatt." Amanda reviewed the documents, her expression thoughtful. When she looked up, something in her face had shifted. "Ms. Rodriguez, off the record, and I'm not supposed to say this, but it looks to me like someone is trying to use the system to harass you. The timing of this report, the vague allegations, the suggestion that the father is ready to step up when you have documentation that he wants nothing to do with you." She closed her tablet. "On the record, I'm noting that Sophia is healthy and well cared for, that you have stable housing and employment, and that there are no current concerns about her safety. I'm closing this case as unfounded." Elena felt tears spill over. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. Just keep doing what you're doing. Keep that baby safe and loved. And if you get any more harassment from the father's family, document everything and consider getting a restraining order." Amanda stood to leave, then paused. "I grew up in foster care. 17 different homes before I aged out. I became a caseworker because I wanted to help keep families together when it's safe to do so. You're doing everything right. Don't let anyone tell you different." After Amanda left, Elena sat on the couch and cried huge, gasping sobs of relief and anger and exhaustion. Margaret sat beside her silently, one hand on her back, letting her purge the fear. "They tried to take her," Elena said when she could speak again. "They couldn't have me, so they tried to take her." "They failed," Margaret said firmly. "And now you have documentation that DCFS found no concerns. If they try anything else, we have that on record." Elena wiped her face. "Why are they doing this? Why can't they just leave us alone? Because you refuse to disappear. You refuse to terminate the pregnancy or give Sophia up for adoption. You made them face consequences, not legal ones maybe, but moral ones. Every time Marcus sees a baby, he'll think about the daughter he abandoned. That's its own kind of justice. I don't want justice. I just want to be left alone to raise my daughter. Then that's what we'll make sure happens." That evening, Elena walked Sophia around Margaret's neighborhood, needing air and movement to process everything. She found herself back at the playground watching older children play in the fading light. Her phone rang. Miguel. "Hey, you okay? Tia Margaret told me about the DCFS visit." "Yeah, it went okay. Better than okay, actually. The caseworker closed the case." "Good. Listen, I'm calling because my mom wants to meet you. She heard about what you're going through, and she wants to help." "Miguel, you've all already done so much." "She has baby clothes, like boxes of them from my youngest sister who's 6 now, and a stroller and some other stuff. She wants to give it to you." Elena felt tears threatening again. "Why is everyone being so kind?" "Because that's what people do," Miguel said simply. "Or at least that's what people should do. Can you come by my parents' house tomorrow? It's Sunday. My mom's making tamales." "I don't want to intrude on your family dinner." "You're not intruding. You're invited. 6 p.m. I'll text you the address." The next day, Margaret drove Elena to the Flores family home in Pilsen, a modest brick house with a well-tended garden and children's toys scattered across the front yard. Miguel's mother, Rosa, answered the door with a baby on her hip and flour in her hair. "Elena, come in, come in. You must be starving. Miguel says you've been working hard." The house was loud and warm, filled with Miguel's siblings and cousins, aunts and uncles, 3 generations speaking a mixture of English and Spanish. Rosa handed Elena a plate piled high with tamales, rice and beans, then took Sophia with the easy confidence of a woman who'd raised 5 children of her own. "She's beautiful," Rosa said, bouncing Sophia gently. "Miguel told me what you've been through, that you're a fighter." "I don't feel like a fighter. I feel like I'm barely surviving. That's what fighting looks like when you're in the middle of it, Rosa said. You think I felt like a hero when I was sleeping in a laundromat? I felt like a failure. But I kept going because I had no choice. And eventually no choice becomes choice, and choice becomes strength. Elena watched as Rosa's family surrounded her, asking about Sofia, offering advice, sharing stories of their own struggles and triumphs. Miguel's father, Javier, showed her photos of the laundromats Rosa now owned, proud of his wife's success. Miguel's siblings asked about her nursing aspirations, promising to help her study when she was ready to go back to school. By the time they left, Elena's car was loaded with baby clothes, a stroller, a high chair for when Sofia was older, and enough frozen tamales to last a week. Rosa hugged her at the door, holding her tight. "You're not alone anymore," Rosa whispered. "We're your family now, too." Driving back to Margaret's apartment, Elena felt something fundamental shift inside her. For 3 months, she'd been in survival mode, trusting no one, accepting no help, terrified that any vulnerability would be used against her. But these people, Margaret and Miguel and Rosa, and all the others, they weren't trying to fix her or save her. They were just making space for her to save herself. "You're smiling," Margaret observed. "I am. First time I've seen it. It's a good look on you." Elena looked down at Sofia, asleep in her car seat, surrounded by bags of clothes and supplies. "I think maybe we're going to be okay." "I know you are," Margaret said. "I've known since that first night when you asked for leftovers but refused charity. You've got steel in you, Elena. You just forgot it was there for a while." That night, as Elena packed for her move to the apartment above the restaurant the next day, she thought about all the versions of herself. She'd been the nursing student with dreams, the pregnant woman abandoned by her child's father, the homeless mother begging for food, and now this person, someone with work and housing and a community of people who believed in her. She was still all of those versions, she realized. The trauma didn't erase the dreams. The homelessness didn't erase the dignity. The fear didn't erase the strength. She was all of it woven together, and that complexity wasn't weakness. It was survival. It was proof that she could endure and still remain herself. She picked up Sofia and stood at Margaret's window, looking out at the Chicago skyline, thinking about tomorrow and all the tomorrows after that. The path ahead was still uncertain, still difficult, but it was a path. It existed, and she was walking it one step at a time with her daughter in her arms, and people behind her who wouldn't let her fall. Monday morning arrived with the kind of clarity that comes after storm clouds break. Elena stood in her new apartment at 5 a.m. Sofia still sleeping in the portable crib Margaret had helped her set up the night before, and allowed herself a moment to simply exist in the space. Her space. Small and sparse, with furniture borrowed from Margaret's storage and donations from the Flores family, but hers. The lock on the door only she and Margaret had keys to. The walls that would witness Sofia's first tooth, first word, first steps. She dressed quickly in her Hyatt uniform, the crisp black pants and white shirt, making her look almost professional, almost like someone who had their life together. The transformation was superficial but powerful. She pinned her name tag to her shirt and stared at her reflection in the small bathroom mirror, practicing the smile she'd need for guests. Margaret was already in the restaurant kitchen when Elena came downstairs with Sofia. The older woman had her reading glasses on, reviewing invoices at the prep station. "First shift at the Hyatt tonight," Margaret said without looking up. "Nervous. Terrified. What if I can't keep up? What if I mess up someone's room? What if they fire me the first day?" "Then you'll find another job. But you won't mess up because Diane Chen doesn't hire people who mess up. She saw something in you." Margaret finally looked up, removing her glasses. "Besides, you've already survived the hardest part. Everything else is just details." Miguel arrived moments later, and they fell into the morning routine that was becoming familiar, the rhythm of chopping and measuring, the comfortable silence, punctuated by occasional questions or instructions. Elena found herself moving more confidently in the kitchen, her hands knowing where the knives were kept, which cutting board to use for which ingredients, how Margaret liked the vegetables cut. The breakfast rush brought the usual regulars and one new face, a woman in her 50s with expensive clothes and an appraising expression. She ordered coffee and sat at a corner table watching Elena work the counter. "Margaret," the woman called out after finishing her coffee. "Could I speak with you for a moment?" Margaret dried her hands and walked over. Elena tried not to eavesdrop, but couldn't help overhearing fragments of conversation. "Your new girl, where did you find her?" "Does it matter?" "I'm looking for household help, someone trustworthy. She seems competent." "She's not available. She works for me and the Hyatt." "I'd pay better than both combined." "And I'd tell you the same thing I'm telling you now, Patricia. She's not for sale." The woman left looking dissatisfied, and Margaret returned to the kitchen without commenting. But Elena had heard enough to understand Margaret was protecting her from being poached, from being seen as desperate enough to take any offer, from being treated as a commodity rather than a person. The morning shift ended at noon, and Elena had 4 hours before she needed to be at the Hyatt. She spent them in her apartment with Sophia, feeding and playing with her daughter, trying to calm her own anxiety about the evening shift. At 3:30, she nursed Sophia one last time, changed her into a clean onesie, and carried her downstairs to Margaret's apartment. Margaret answered the door, already reaching for the baby. "You have everything I need. Bottles, diapers, change of clothes. All in the bag. She just ate, so she should be good for a few hours. If she gets fussy..." "I raised a child, Elena. I can handle a fussy baby." Margaret's voice was gentle despite the words. "Go. Do your job. We'll be fine." The walk to the Hyatt took 20 minutes, and Elena used the time to rehearse everything Diane had told her during Friday's orientation. The proper way to strip a bed, the specific products to use in bathrooms versus on furniture, the importance of never touching guest belongings, the protocol for finding valuables or contraband. Diane was waiting in the housekeeping office when Elena arrived along with 3 other women in matching uniforms. One was Teresa, the housekeeper who'd first suggested Elena apply. The others were strangers. "Elena, you'll shadow Teresa today," Diane said. "Learn the routine, the speed we need, the standards we maintain. Tomorrow you'll have your own cart and your own floor." Teresa's efficiency was intimidating. She moved through rooms like a choreographed dance, stripping beds in smooth motions, cleaning bathrooms with practiced speed, checking every surface for dust or smudges. Elena tried to keep up, tried to absorb every technique and shortcut. "Don't overthink it," Teresa said, remaking a king-size bed with hospital corners. "The first week you'll be slow. Everyone is. But muscle memory kicks in, and then you can do this half asleep." They worked their way through 12 rooms in 4 hours. Elena's back ached, and her hands were raw from cleaning products, but there was satisfaction in the physical exhaustion in seeing immediate results from her labor. During their 15-minute break, Teresa bought them both coffee from the employee cafeteria, and they sat in the back hallway where the housekeeping staff took their breaks. "Diane told me a little about your situation," Teresa said carefully. "That you've got a baby that you're rebuilding." Elena tensed. "Is that going to be a problem?" "The opposite. It means you'll appreciate this job. Too many people work here and complain constantly like cleaning hotel rooms is beneath them. But this job kept my family fed for 18 years, put my 3 kids through college, bought me a house." Teresa sipped her coffee. "There's dignity in any honest work. Don't let anyone tell you different." They finished the shift at 8:30, and Elena practically ran back to Margaret's apartment. She found Margaret in her rocking chair, Sophia asleep against her shoulder, the older woman humming something soft and melodic. "How was she?" Elena whispered. "Perfect. Took her bottle at 6, stayed awake for an hour, went down without a fight." Margaret stood carefully and transferred Sophia to Elena's arms. "How was your first shift?" "Hard. My back is killing me. But I did it. I kept up with Teresa, didn't break anything, didn't get yelled at. Then it was a success." Margaret walked Elena to the door. "Same routine tomorrow. Bring Sophia down before you leave, pick her up when you get back." The days began to blur into a rhythm. Wake at 5, work the breakfast shift at the restaurant, spend afternoons with Sophia, work evenings at the Hyatt, fall into bed exhausted. Elena's body ached constantly those first 2 weeks, but it was the good kind of ache, the kind that came from use rather than deprivation. Her first paycheck from the Hyatt arrived on a Friday, 2 weeks of work at $7.50 an hour minus taxes. $208. She held the check like it was made of something precious, then walked to the bank during her afternoon break and opened her first checking account in 6 months. The teller, a young man with kind eyes, processed the deposit and handed her a temporary debit card. "Welcome back," he said, and Elena realized he meant welcome back to the banking system, to the world of people who had addresses and social security numbers and the documentation that proved they existed in society's eyes. She bought groceries on the way home, real groceries, not just formula and diapers, but fruits and vegetables and chicken breast and the ingredients to make actual meals. She cooked dinner that night in her tiny kitchen. Sophia in a bouncer seat watching her and ate at her own table in her own apartment, and the simple normalcy of it made her cry into her pasta. 3 weeks into her new routine, Margaret knocked on Elena's apartment door at 11 p.m. Elena answered in her pajamas, Sophia already down for the night. "Is something wrong?" Elena asked, alarmed by the late visit. "Yes, you're working yourself to death." Margaret pushed past her into the apartment. "You're doing double shifts 6 days a week. When do you sleep? When do you take care of yourself?" "I'm fine. I'm managing." "You're not fine. You've lost weight you couldn't afford to lose. You have circles under your eyes. This morning you nearly fell asleep standing up while chopping onions." Margaret's voice was sharp with concern. "This pace isn't sustainable. I need both jobs. I need to save money to build a cushion to collapse from exhaustion, to get sick, to make a mistake at work that gets you fired." Margaret sat heavily on Elena's second-hand couch. "I'm not saying quit one of the jobs. I'm saying you need a day off. 1 day a week, where you don't work at all, where you just focus on Sophia and yourself." "I can't afford to lose a day's wages." "Then don't lose them. I'll pay you for the missed day at the restaurant. Same rate." Elena shook her head. "I can't accept that. You're already doing too much." "What I'm doing is ensuring my employee doesn't burn out and quit on me. It's a business decision." Margaret's tone softened. "Elena, I've seen this before. People trying to claw their way out of poverty by working themselves into the ground. Sometimes it works. More often, they break before they make it. I'm not letting you break." Elena sank onto the couch beside her, too tired to argue. "I'm scared that if I slow down, if I take even 1 day off, I'll lose momentum. That everything will fall apart again." That's trauma talking. The trauma of instability, of not knowing where your next meal is coming from. But you're not in that place anymore. You have housing. You have 2 jobs. You have people supporting you. Taking 1 day off isn't going to erase all of that. What if Marcus's family comes back? What if they try something else? I need to be ready, need to have enough saved up to fight them if I have to. Margaret was quiet for a long moment. "Has there been any contact since the DCFS visit?" "No, but that doesn't mean they're done. They could be planning something waiting for me to screw up. Or they could have realized they have no case and moved on. You can't live your entire life preparing for attacks that might never come. That's not living, that's just surviving in a different way." Elena knew Margaret was right, but the fear was hard to release. Fear had kept her alert, had kept Sophia safe during those months on the street. Learning to live without constant vigilance felt dangerous. "Start small," Margaret suggested. "Take Sundays off. Sleep in. Take Sophia to the park, cook a real meal, do laundry without rushing. Just 1 day. See how it feels." Elena agreed, mostly because she was too exhausted to keep arguing. But that first Sunday off, she woke at 5 a.m. anyway, body trained to the alarm that hadn't gone off. She lay in bed listening to Sophia's breathing, waiting for the panic to hit, for the feeling that she was wasting time falling behind. Instead, she felt only tired, bone-deep existential tired. the kind that comes from running for so long that you've forgotten why you started running in the first place. She got up and made coffee, then sat at her small table and did something she hadn't allowed herself in months. She thought about the future beyond the next shift, the next paycheck, the next crisis. She thought about Sophia starting Solid Foods in a few weeks, about her daughter's first birthday that would come in 7 months, about going back to school someday to finish her nursing degree. The thoughts felt both impossibly distant and suddenly achievable, like looking at a mountain from the base and realizing it has a path to the top. At 9 a.m. there was a knock at her door. She opened it to find Rosa Flores standing there with a bag of groceries and Miguel's youngest sister, a 6-year-old named Carmen. "Miguel told me Margaret made you take a day off," Rosa said, pushing past Elena into the apartment. "So I'm teaching you to make tamales. Carmen is here to play with Sophia." "Sophia's only 6 months old. She can't really play yet." "Then Carmen will entertain her while we cook. Same thing." Rosa was already unpacking ingredients onto Elena's counter, masa dried corn husks fillings for the tamales. "You need to learn this. It's cheaper than buying prepared food, and you can freeze them for quick meals." They spent the morning in Elena's tiny kitchen, Rosa demonstrating the proper technique for spreading masa, for folding the husks, for stacking them in the steamer. Carmen sat on the floor with Sophia singing nursery rhymes in Spanish and making the baby laugh with silly faces. "Miguel worries about you," Rosa said while they worked. "He thinks you're pushing too hard." "Everyone thinks I'm pushing too hard, but what's the alternative? Work less, save less, stay vulnerable." "The alternative is balance. Work hard, yes, but also live. Sophia needs a mother who's present, not just providing." Rosa expertly folded another tamale. "When I was homeless, I told myself that once I had stability, I'd relax. But stability came, and I kept working like I was still desperate. Missed my kids' childhoods because I was always working. By the time I realized what I'd lost, they were teenagers who barely knew me." "But you said yourself that work bought you houses and sent your kids to college." "It did, but I could have done it slower and had more time with them. That's the part I regret." Rosa met Elena's eyes. "I'm not saying don't work hard. I'm saying don't sacrifice the present for a future that might not come. Sophia will only be a baby once." After Rosa and Carmen left, Elena looked at the dozen tamales cooling on her counter and realized she couldn't remember the last time someone had taught her something, just to be kind, with no expectation of payment or reciprocation. The gesture felt almost as nourishing as the food itself. That afternoon, she took Sophia to the park Margaret had mentioned, the one 3 blocks away. She spread a blanket under a tree and let Sophia do tummy time on the grass while she read a book from Margaret's shelf, a novel about women surviving impossible circumstances, finding strength in unexpected places. A woman pushing a stroller paused nearby. "How old?" 6.5 months, Elena said. "She's beautiful." "First baby?" "Yes." "Hardest and best thing you'll ever do." The woman smiled and continued walking, and Elena felt the strange camaraderie of motherhood, the way women with children acknowledged each other in public spaces, a silent recognition of shared experience. On Monday, Elena returned to her double-shift routine, but found she could breathe a little easier, think a little clearer. The single day off had done something she hadn't expected. It had reminded her that life existed beyond survival, that there were moments worth experiencing beyond just making it to the next day. The weeks accumulated into months. Elena's body adapted to the physical demands of her work. Her bank account grew slowly but steadily. Sophia began sitting up on her own, then crawling, filling the small apartment with new energy and chaos. At 3 months into her new life, Elena received a letter forwarded from the university. She opened it, expecting a bill, some final piece of debt from her truncated education. Instead, she found a notice about a scholarship program specifically for students who'd had to withdraw due to family emergencies. The application deadline was in 6 weeks. She brought the letter to Margaret that evening after her shift at the Hyatt, hands shaking with something between hope and terror. It's for parents who had to drop out. It covers tuition and books if I can maintain a 3.5 GPA. I could take one class next semester online at night. Start working toward finishing my degree. Margaret read the letter carefully. What's holding you back? Time. Money for the application fee. Fear that I can't handle school and 2 jobs and Sophia. Time is something you make. The application fee is $40. I'll lend it to you. And as for handling it, Margaret looked at Elena over the top of the letter. You've handled worse. You're already doing the impossible. Adding one online class is just details. What if I fail? What if I get overwhelmed and have to drop out again? I can't afford another mark against me at the university. And what if you succeed? What if you prove to yourself that you can do this? That you're still that 3.7 student, just with more responsibility and better perspective? Margaret folded the letter and handed it back. I'm not going to tell you what to do, Elena, but I will tell you this fear of failure is just another kind of prison. And you didn't survive what you survived just to lock yourself up in a new one. Elena applied for the scholarship that weekend, Rosa watching Sophia while she filled out the forms at the library computer. The essay question asked her to describe the circumstances that had led to her withdrawal and her plans for completing her degree. She wrote about Marcus and his family, about losing everything about the months on the street. But she also wrote about Margaret and Miguel and Rosa, about learning that asking for help wasn't weakness, about discovering that community could be built from strangers who chose to care. The essay was supposed to be 500 words. She wrote 1,200 and couldn't cut a single sentence. She submitted it anyway, figuring they'd either reject her for not following instructions or see something in her story worth taking a chance on. 6 weeks later, sitting at Margaret's kitchen table after her morning shift, Elena opened the response email. Dear Ms. Rodriguez, we are pleased to inform you that you have been selected. She couldn't read beyond that line. The words blurred, and she started crying so hard, Margaret rushed over alarmed. What happened? Is it bad news? I got it. Elena gasped between sobs. I got the scholarship. I can go back to school. Margaret pulled her into a hug, and they stood there in the kitchen, 2 women who'd both had to rebuild their lives from scratch, both crying for different reasons that were somehow the same. When do you start? Margaret asked when they'd both composed themselves. Spring semester, January. I can take 1 class online. Introduction to Pathophysiology. Then we'll make it work. We'll adjust schedules. We'll figure out the logistics. You're going to finish that nursing degree, Elena. You're going to be exactly who you wanted to be. That evening, after her shift at the Hyatt, Elena stopped by the Flores house to share the news. Rosa hugged her and immediately started planning a celebration. Miguel high-fived her and said he'd help her study, that he remembered pathophysiology from his biomedical engineering classes. Javier, Miguel's father, pulled her aside before she left. My wife told me about where you came from, about what you've been through. I want you to know something. The measure of a person isn't whether they fall. Everyone falls. The measure is whether they get back up and keep moving forward. You're proving your measure every single day. Walking home through the cold November evening, Sophia bundled against her chest. Elena thought about the woman she'd been 8 months ago standing outside a restaurant begging for leftovers. That woman had been terrified and desperate and certain that her life was over, that she'd failed Sophia before her daughter's life had really begun. She thought about the woman. She was now still scared. Sometimes still struggling, but no longer alone, no longer drowning. Working 2 jobs, raising her daughter, preparing to go back to school. Building something that looked like a future. The transformation hadn't been magic or charity or rescue. It had been Margaret's tough love and Rosa's patience and Miguel's solidarity and her own stubborn refusal to give up even when giving up would have been easier. It had been small choices compounded over time, help accepted, and dignity maintained. Fear acknowledged, but not obeyed. She climbed the stairs to her apartment, unlocked her door, turned on lights that belonged to her. She fed Sophia and rocked her to sleep, then sat at her table with her laptop and pulled up the spring semester course schedule. Introduction to Pathophysiology. Tuesdays and Thursdays 8 to 10 p.m. online. She registered for the class, feeling her heart race as she clicked the confirm button. Then she opened a new document and started taking notes from her old textbooks, preparing herself, getting ready. Because Margaret was right, she'd survived the hardest part. Everything else was just details. And Elena had learned over these past months that she was very good at managing details, at doing what needed to be done, at showing up, even when showing up felt impossible. Sophia stirred in her crib, making small sounds, and Elena went to her, lifting her daughter into her arms, breathing in that baby smell that was already changing as Sophia grew. "We're going to make it," she whispered into Sophia's hair. "We're going to be okay. Better than okay." And for the first time since that terrible day in Marcus's father's office, Elena actually believed it. The first day of spring semester arrived with unexpected snow, the kind that turned Chicago into something almost beautiful, softening the hard edges of buildings and streets. Elena sat at her kitchen table at 6 a.m. Sophia, still sleeping, laptop open to the pathophysiology course portal. The syllabus was intimidating: 12 chapters, weekly quizzes, a midterm and final lab simulations she'd have to complete on her own time. She'd forgotten how demanding nursing courses were, how much information they expected students to absorb and retain. Her phone buzzed. "Margaret. Coffee's on. Come down before your shift." Elena bundled Sophia and made her way downstairs. Margaret had the restaurant kitchen warm and bright steam rising from the espresso machine. "First day of class, technically," Margaret said, pouring Elena a large coffee. "How are you feeling?" "Like I've forgotten how to be a student. Like maybe I made a mistake thinking I could do this." "You made a mistake once. It was trusting Marcus. This isn't that." Margaret slid a breakfast sandwich across the counter. "Eat. You need protein for your brain to work." Miguel arrived early, taking one look at Elena's face and grinning. "Nervous about pathophys? That's a beast of a class. But you'll crush it. You're smarter than half the engineering students I know." "Being smart doesn't mean I can handle the workload. I haven't studied in almost 2 years. What if I've lost—" "You haven't lost anything except time, and you're getting that back now." Miguel tied on his apron. "Besides, you're doing this for Sophia. Kids know when their parents are fighting for something. It matters even when they're too young to understand why." The morning shift passed in its usual rhythm, but Elena's mind kept drifting to the class lecture she'd have to watch that evening, to the first assignment due Friday, to the reading she'd need to fit in somewhere between work and sleep. When lunch rush ended, she went upstairs to find Rosa waiting at her apartment door with Carmen and a bag of groceries. "Miguel told me you start class today," Rosa said. "So Carmen and I are making dinner for you. You're going to eat, then study while we watch Sophia." "Rosa, I can't ask you to." "You're not asking, I'm telling." Rosa pushed past her into the apartment. "Besides, Carmen loves babies. She's been asking all week when she can visit Sophia again." Carmen was already on the floor with Sophia, who at 8 months old was pulling herself up on furniture and babbling constantly. The two of them had developed a routine. Carmen would sing songs in Spanish, and Sophia would clap her hands, not quite in rhythm, but with pure joy. Rosa cooked while Elena ate, and then opened her laptop at the kitchen table. The first lecture was 90 minutes long, covering cellular injury and adaptation. Elena took notes by hand, muscle memory from her student days, returning her writing, getting faster as she found her rhythm. "You look different when you're studying," Rosa observed, stirring something on the stove. "More like yourself, maybe. Like you're doing what you're supposed to be doing." "I feel guilty," Elena admitted, pausing the lecture. "Like I should be working another shift, making more money, not sitting here learning about cell death mechanisms." "Education is work. It's investment. You think I regret the money I spent on Miguel's tuition or my other kids' college? That money is working for them every day, earning returns I can't calculate." Rosa tasted her soup and added more salt. "When Sophia's older, and she asks what you did when things were hard, you'll tell her you worked 2 jobs and raised her and went back to school. That's a story worth telling." Elena returned to her lecture, and Rosa's words settled into her bones alongside the information about necrosis and apoptosis. By the time she needed to leave for her Hyatt shift, she'd completed the first lecture and half the reading assignment. Rosa packed the leftover soup into containers and hugged Elena at the door. "Every Tuesday and Thursday, Carmen and I come over at 3. You study, we handle Sophia. No arguments." The Hyatt shift felt longer than usual. Elena's mind divided between scrubbing toilets and reviewing the lecture in her head. During her break, she pulled out her phone and read through the course discussion board, where other students were introducing themselves. Single mothers, returning students, people working full-time while studying. She wasn't alone in trying to do the impossible. She posted her own introduction, keeping it brief. Elena, former UIC student returning after family circumstances. Working full-time, have an 8-month-old daughter determined to finish what I started. Within an hour, 3 other students had responded with encouragement and offers to form a study group. By the time her shift ended, she had a group chat going with 5 other women, all juggling similar challenges, all offering to support each other. Margaret was waiting in her apartment when Elena got home, reading in the rocking chair with Sophia asleep against her shoulder. "You have a study group already," Margaret said, having apparently read the messages over Elena's shoulder when she came in. "That's good. You'll need that support system." "I feel like I'm building a life in pieces," Elena said, taking Sophia carefully. "Work, school, motherhood, all these separate parts that don't quite fit together yet. They never fit perfectly. You just get better at juggling." Margaret stood stretching her back. "Daniel used to say that balance is a myth. It's really just controlled chaos where you drop some balls sometimes, but catch the important ones." "Which ones are the important ones?" "Sophia. Your health. Your sanity. Everything else, work, school, money. Those are means to an end. Don't mistake them for the end itself." The weeks fell into a new pattern. Work the restaurant mornings. Study during afternoon breaks while Rosa watched Sophia work. Hyatt evenings. Study late into the night after Sophia went to sleep. Weekends. She worked longer shifts to make up for study time lost during the week. Her first quiz score came back 87%. Not perfect, but solid. Proof she could still do this. At the 2-month mark, Miguel knocked on her door at midnight. Elena answered in her pajamas, laptop still open on the table behind her, Sophia long asleep. "Tia, Margaret is worried about you," he said without preamble. "Says you're burning out again, that you're studying until 2 a.m. every night. I have a midterm next week. You need to sleep. Come downstairs. I'm making you chamomile tea and you're going to drink it and go to bed at a reasonable hour like a human being." Elena followed him down to the restaurant kitchen, too tired to argue. Miguel put the kettle on and pulled out 2 mugs, moving through Margaret's kitchen with the ease of family. "I nearly failed out my first semester back at Northwestern," he said while the water heated. "After my brother died, different brother, not the one you met, my middle brother Carlos, I couldn't focus on anything. Failed 2 classes, almost lost my scholarship." "I didn't know you'd lost a brother." "Gang violence, wrong place, wrong time. He was 16. Miguel's voice was steady, but his hands trembled slightly as he poured the tea. "I thought going back to school would honor his memory, would make his death mean something. But I was so busy trying to be perfect to justify surviving when he didn't, that I nearly destroyed myself." "What changed?" "My mom. She told me Carlos wouldn't want me to kill myself trying to be worthy of living. He'd want me to actually live, to be present, to do good work without sacrificing my health for it." Miguel handed Elena her tea. "You're doing the same thing, trying to prove something by working yourself to death. But Sophia doesn't need you to be perfect. She needs you to be alive and functional." Elena wrapped her hands around the warm mug. "I'm so afraid of failing, of proving that Marcus and his family were right, that I can't do this, that I'm not good enough." "They were never right. And you don't have to prove anything to anyone except yourself and Sophia." Miguel sat across from her. "You're already succeeding. You have housing, 2 jobs, you're passing your class. You've rebuilt a life from nothing. That's not failure, Elena, that's triumph. So why are you still fighting like you're about to lose everything? The question hit her like cold water. She'd been operating on survival instinct for so long that she'd forgotten how to recognize when she was actually safe, actually stable. The trauma of homelessness had carved neural pathways in her brain that kept firing even though the danger had passed. I don't know how to stop being afraid, she admitted. You don't stop being afraid, you just learn to act despite the fear. And you build enough structure in your life that the fear can't knock everything down. Miguel finished his tea. Tia Margaret has a proposition for you. She wants to talk to you tomorrow, but I'll tell you now, she wants to hire someone else for the morning shift so you can focus on school and the Hyatt. But I need that income. She's not cutting your pay. She's restructuring your role. You'd manage inventory and ordering work from home, mostly fewer hours but same wage because you'd be doing skilled work instead of prep work. It would give you more flexibility for studying. Elena felt tears threatening. Why does she keep helping me? What does she get out of this? Purpose, family, someone to care about. Miguel stood rinsing their mugs. Tia Margaret lost everything when Daniel and Uncle Robert died. Having you and Sophia around helping you build a life, it's giving her a reason to keep going. You're helping her as much as she's helping you. The next morning, Margaret laid out her proposal over breakfast. Elena would transition to an administrative role handling the restaurant's ordering and inventory management, maintaining vendor relationships, managing schedules. 20 hours a week instead of 30, same pay at a higher hourly rate. Work she could mostly do from home, around Sophia's naps and her study schedule. I don't know anything about restaurant management, Elena protested. You know how to follow systems and pay attention to detail. I'll teach you the rest. Margaret slid a binder across the table. This is everything you need to know. Vendor contacts, order schedules, inventory tracking. You're smart enough to learn it in 2 weeks. Why are you doing this? Because burning yourself out helps no one. Because I need someone I trust to eventually take over more of the business operations so I can step back. Because watching you destroy yourself to prove something is painful, and I'm tired of watching people I care about suffer unnecessarily. Elena opened the binder, scanning the meticulous records Margaret had kept for years. It was overwhelming, but comprehensible, a system that made sense once you understood the logic underlying it. When would I start? Next week. I've already hired someone to cover the morning prep shifts. Miguel will train him. You'll shadow me for 2 weeks learning the administrative side, then you'll take it over. The transition was harder than Elena expected, not because the work was difficult, but because it required a different kind of thinking. She'd gotten used to the physical exhaustion of kitchen and housekeeping work, the way she could shut off her mind and just let her body move. Administrative work demanded attention and decision-making, comparing prices and tracking trends, negotiating with vendors, and managing relationships. But it also meant she could study. While Sophia played nearby, could take breaks to nurse or change diapers, could work in her pajamas at midnight, if that's when she had energy. The flexibility was disorienting at first, like suddenly having permission to breathe after holding her breath for months. Her midterm score came back 92%, the highest grade in the course discussion board that week. One of her study group members posted a congratulatory message and others chimed in. Elena felt something unfamiliar: pride. Not just relief at not failing, but actual pride in her achievement. Sophia turned 9 months old on a Tuesday, and the Flores family threw her a small party at their house. Elena sat at the table surrounded by Rosa's children and grandchildren, watching Sophia demolish a small piece of cake with both hands, and realized this was family. Not blood family, not the family she'd been born into or tried to create with Marcus, but the family she'd found through crisis and kindness. Javier pulled her aside while the others sang happy birthday. Rosa and I have been talking. Sophia will need childcare when she gets older, when she's ready for preschool. We want to offer to watch her. I can't afford to pay what childcare costs. We're not asking you to pay. We're offering to help. Carmen is homeschooled by Rosa anyway. One more child in the mix doesn't change much. And when Sofia's old enough, she can join Carmen's lessons. Elena's throat tightened. Why would you do this? Because you're family now. Because Rosa sees herself in you, sees the mother she was 20 years ago. Because we have the capacity to help, and it costs us nothing to be kind. Javier squeezed her shoulder. Let us help you, Elena. You don't have to do everything alone. That night, lying in bed with Sofia asleep beside her, Elena thought about the year that had passed since that evening outside the restaurant when she'd asked a stranger for leftovers. She thought about the woman she'd been desperate, terrified, certain her life was over. She thought about the woman she was becoming, student worker, mother, friend, someone embedded in a community that had chosen to care about her. The knock on her door at 7 a.m. the next morning was unexpected. Elena answered in her robe, Sofia on her hip, to find a man in a suit standing in the hallway. Elena Rodriguez. Yes. I'm serving you with papers on behalf of Marcus Caldwell and his family. They're filing for custody of Sofia Rodriguez Caldwell. Elena's entire world tilted. She took the papers with shaking hands, unable to speak, unable to process. The man left without another word, and Elena stood in her doorway reading the legal complaint through tears that blurred the words. Marcus's family was suing for full custody, claiming that Elena was an unfit mother due to her history of homelessness, her inability to provide stable housing, her demanding work schedule that left Sofia in inadequate care. They were offering to raise Sofia themselves to provide opportunities and stability Elena couldn't match to give her the life she deserved. Elena barely made it back inside her apartment before her legs gave out. She sat on the floor, Sofia crawling around her, and called Margaret. They're taking her. Marcus's family is suing for custody. They're going to take my baby. I'm coming up. Margaret appeared within minutes, still in her bathrobe, and took the papers from Elena's hands. She read them carefully, her expression darkening with each page. This is retaliation. You didn't disappear, didn't fail, didn't give them any ammunition, so they're manufacturing it. Margaret set down the papers. But Elena, listen to me. You're not the woman they're describing. You're not homeless. You're not unstable. You're employed. You're in school. You have housing and childcare and community support. They're basing this on who you were 8 months ago, not who you are now. It doesn't matter. They have money for lawyers. They have resources. I have... Elena gestured helplessly around her small apartment. I have nothing. You have me. You have Rosa and Javier and Miguel. You have Teresa and Diane from the Hyatt. You have documentation of your employment, your education, your housing, your support system. Margaret pulled out her phone. And you have something else. My daughter-in-law, Robert's niece, is a family law attorney. She owes me a favor. I'm calling her right now. By noon, Elena was sitting in a downtown law office across from Jennifer Kim, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who'd taken one look at the custody complaint and said a word Elena's mother would have washed her mouth out for saying. This is a bullshit filing designed to intimidate you into giving up or accepting a settlement where they get visitation rights, Jennifer said bluntly. But it's also dangerous because family courts can be unpredictable, especially when one party has significantly more resources. So they could win. They could actually take Sofia. They could if we let them control the narrative. But we're not going to do that. Jennifer opened her laptop. We're going to document everything. Your employment history, your housing, your education, your support network. We're going to get character statements from Margaret, from Rosa, from your employers. We're going to get medical records showing Sofia is healthy and thriving. We're going to build a case that shows you're an excellent mother who's overcome extraordinary circumstances to provide for your child. I can't afford. Margaret's already paid my retainer, and before you argue, she told me you'd say that, and she told me to tell you to shut up and let people help you. Despite everything, Elena almost smiled. That sounded exactly like Margaret. The next 3 weeks were a blur of documentation and preparation. Jennifer had Elena write out a detailed timeline of everything that had happened since Marcus abandoned her, the scholarship loss, The housing loss, the months on the street, the meeting with Margaret, every step of rebuilding. She gathered pay stubs, bank statements, course transcripts, proof of her progress. Margaret, Rosa, Diane, and Teresa all wrote detailed character statements. Miguel provided documentation of Elena's work at the restaurant, including the transition to administrative duties and her growing responsibilities. Jennifer compiled medical records showing Sophia's consistent well baby checkups, her healthy development, her up-to-date vaccinations. "We're building a picture," Jennifer explained during one of their preparation meetings. "Not of a perfect mother. Perfection isn't the standard. We're showing a mother who loves her child enough to do extraordinarily hard things to provide for her, who asked for help when she needed it, who accepted support and used it to become stable. That's the story we're telling." The court date was set for 6 weeks out. In the meantime, Marcus's lawyers requested a home visit and an interview with Elena. Jennifer advised her to comply, to be cooperative, to show she had nothing to hide. The social worker who came to her apartment was a tired-looking woman named Patricia, who'd clearly conducted thousands of these visits. She walked through the small space, noting the cleanliness, the baby-proofing the crib and toys and books. "How many hours a week do you work?" Patricia asked, making notes on her tablet. 20 at the restaurant doing administrative work plus 30 at the Hyatt, 50 total. "And Sophia is with you during the restaurant hours?" "Yes. I work from home mostly for that job, and during my Hyatt shifts she's with Margaret Chen, a retired trauma nurse who's like family." "Not actual family, though." "Chosen family," Elena said firmly, "which is stronger than blood family in my experience." Patricia asked about childcare costs, about Elena's income, about her plans for the future. Elena answered honestly, not trying to pretend her situation was something it wasn't, but also not apologizing for the choices she'd made to survive. "Ms. Rodriguez," Patricia said when the interview concluded, "I've been doing this job for 19 years. I've seen every kind of family situation there is. And I'll tell you what I see here. I see a baby who's loved, healthy, and bonded to her mother. I see a mother who's working her ass off to provide stability. That matters more than income level or the size of an apartment. So you'll tell the court I'm fit. I'll tell the court what I observed. The rest is up to the judge." Patricia stood to leave, then paused. "Off the record, I hope you win this. The Caldwell family's filing reads like rich people who want a baby accessory, not like people who actually care about this child's well-being." After Patricia left, Elena called Jennifer to report how the visit went. The lawyer sounded cautiously optimistic. "The social worker's report will matter. But Elena, you need to prepare yourself for the possibility that we might not win this. Family courts are supposed to prioritize the child's best interests, but they don't always get it right. Sometimes money talks louder than love." "If I lose her," Elena couldn't finish the sentence. "Then we appeal, we fight. We don't stop fighting until Sophia's with you where she belongs. But I don't think it will come to that. I think we have a strong case." The night before the court hearing, Elena couldn't sleep. She lay in bed watching Sophia breathe, memorizing every detail of her daughter's face, terrified this might be one of their last nights together. At 2 a.m., she heard footsteps in the hallway, and then a soft knock. Margaret in her bathrobe carrying 2 mugs of tea. "Couldn't sleep either," Margaret said, sitting on the edge of Elena's bed. "Been lying awake thinking about tomorrow, about all the ways it could go wrong." "I'm terrified," Elena whispered. "Not just of losing Sophia, but of what it means if I lose her. That all of this, the work, the struggle, the rebuilding, was for nothing." "It wasn't for nothing, even if the worst happens. You proved to yourself that you could survive, that you could rebuild, that you could ask for help and accept love. That has value regardless of what some judge decides tomorrow." "I can't lose her, Margaret. She's everything." "I know, and we're going to fight like hell to make sure you don't." Margaret sipped her tea. "But Elena, I need to tell you something. Whatever happens tomorrow, you're not alone. If the worst happens and they take Sophia, we don't give up. We appeal, we fight, we document everything. And in the meantime, You still have a job, you still have housing, you still have people who care about you. You won't fall back into the place you came from. I won't let that happen." Elena nodded, unable to speak. They sat in silence, drinking tea, both women knowing that tomorrow would reshape everything, but not knowing which direction the shape would take. At dawn, Elena dressed Sophia in the new outfit Rosa had bought for the occasion, a soft pink dress with matching shoes. The kind of outfit that said, someone loved this baby. Someone cared about her presentation. Someone was invested in her well-being. Elena wore the suit Margaret had bought her, simple and professional, nothing flashy, but nothing shabby either. The courthouse was intimidating, all marble and authority. Marcus was there with his parents, wearing expensive suits, flanked by 3 lawyers. They didn't acknowledge Elena when she arrived, didn't look at Sophia. They treated both of them like problems to be solved, rather than people to be encountered. Jennifer met Elena outside the courtroom. "Remember what we talked about? Answer questions directly and honestly. Don't get defensive. Don't badmouth Marcus or his family. Just tell your truth and trust the process. And if the judge doesn't care about the truth, then we appeal. But let's not borrow trouble before it arrives." The hearing lasted 4 hours. Marcus's lawyers painted a picture of instability and inadequacy, highlighting Elena's homelessness, her limited income, her demanding schedule. They brought up the DCFS complaint, glossing over the fact that it had been dismissed as unfounded. They presented evidence of the Caldwell family's wealth and resources, the private schools Sophia could attend, the opportunities she'd have access to. Jennifer countered with Elena's timeline, with the character statements, with evidence of Sophia's health and happiness. She called Margaret to the stand, who testified about Elena's work ethic and parenting. She called Rosa, who spoke about the community support Elena had built. She called Diane from the Hyatt, who vouched for Elena's reliability and character. Elena herself testified for 90 minutes, walking through her story from meeting Marcus to this moment, not hiding the hard parts, but also not apologizing for surviving them. "Ms. Rodriguez," the judge asked near the end of her testimony, "why should I believe Sophia is better off with you working 2 jobs and living in a small apartment than with the Caldwell family, who can provide material advantages you can't match?" Elena looked at Sophia, sitting on Margaret's lap in the gallery, chewing on a teething toy content, and loved. "Because I'm her mother," Elena said simply. "Not because I gave birth to her, but because I've been there for every middle of the night feeding, every diaper change, every milestone. Because when I had nothing, I still made sure she had everything she needed. Because she knows my voice, my smell, my heartbeat. Because love isn't about money or resources. It's about showing up day after day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." She paused, gathering her courage for what she needed to say next. The Caldwell family has never met Sophia. They've never asked to visit her, never sent a birthday card, never acknowledged her existence. They're not here because they love her. They're here because they want to control a situation they couldn't control before. But Sophia isn't a situation. She's a person, and she deserves to be raised by someone who sees her that way. The judge made no comment, just thanked Elena and dismissed her from the stand. After both sides rested, he said he'd issue a ruling within 72 hours and adjourned the hearing. In the hallway afterward, Marcus's father approached Elena while his lawyers were distracted. "This doesn't have to go on," he said quietly. "We could settle this right now. You let us have reasonable visitation supervised on our terms, and we'll drop the custody suit. We'll even establish a trust fund for Sophia's education." Elena looked at this man who'd called her white trash, who'd tried to pay her to disappear, who'd filed false reports with DCFS, who'd put her through this legal nightmare. "No," she said clearly. "You don't get to terrorize me for months and then offer compromises. You made your choice when Marcus abandoned us. You made it again when you tried to have Sophia taken away through DCFS. You don't get a relationship with her now. You lost that right. You're being unreasonable. We're her family." "No, I'm her family. Margaret is her family. Rosa and Miguel are her family. You're just people who share her DNA. Elena turned away. If the judge rules in your favor, I'll fight it until I have no fight left. But I will never ever voluntarily give you access to my daughter. She walked away before he could respond, her hands shaking, but her spine straight. The next 72 hours were the longest of Elena's life. She went to work, studied for finals, took care of Sophia, all while her phone sat nearby like a bomb waiting to explode. Jennifer had warned her that no news was normal, that judges took their time with custody cases, but every hour of silence felt like a countdown to disaster. On the third day at 4:17 p.m., Jennifer called. Elena, we won. Full custody to you with no visitation rights granted to the Caldwell family. The judge ruled that there was no evidence of parental unfitness, that Sophia is thriving in your care, and that the custody suit appeared motivated by vindictiveness, rather than genuine concern for the child's welfare. Elena dropped the phone, picked it up, dropped it again. Elena, are you there? I won? Her voice didn't sound like hers. You won. It's over. Sophia stays with you. Elena hung up and immediately called Margaret, Rosa, Miguel, everyone who'd supported her through this nightmare. Then she picked up Sophia and held her close, crying into her daughter's hair. You're mine, she whispered. You're mine, and nobody can take you away. We made it, baby girl. We actually made it. That night, Margaret insisted on hosting a celebration dinner at the restaurant, closing it early to the public and filling it with the people who'd become Elena's family. Rosa brought tamales and champorado. Miguel brought his guitar and played songs his grandmother had taught him. Jennifer came with her wife, and Diane from the Hyatt stopped by after her shift with a card signed by the entire housekeeping staff. Elena stood in the middle of the restaurant, surrounded by these people holding Sophia, and felt something shift permanently inside her. The fear that had been driving her for so long, the certainty that everything could be ripped away at any moment, began to loosen its grip. She was safe. Sophia was safe. They had a life, a real life, built on community and effort, and the radical kindness of people who'd chosen to care. Speech, Miguel called out, and others joined in chanting until Elena had to say something. I don't know how to thank you all. She began, her voice shaking. A year ago, I was standing outside this restaurant begging for leftovers. I thought my life was over, that I'd failed Sophia before she'd even had a chance. But Margaret... She looked at the older woman who was pretending not to cry. Margaret saw something in me I couldn't see in myself. She didn't just give me a meal. She gave me a chance to rebuild. And then all of you... She gestured around the room. You gave me community, gave me support, gave me reasons to keep going when quitting felt easier. Sophia babbled loudly, making everyone laugh, and Elena kissed her daughter's head. I've learned this past year that family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up, who sits with you in the dark, who fights for you when you can't fight for yourself. You're all Sophia's family. You're my family. And I will spend the rest of my life paying forward what you've given me. Margaret stood and raised her glass. To Elena, to surviving, to thriving, to proving that kindness isn't weakness, and asking for help isn't failure, to building families from strangers and finding home in unexpected places. To Elena. Everyone chorused, and Elena felt the words settle into her bones like benediction. Later that night, after everyone had left and Sophia was asleep, Elena sat at her kitchen table with her laptop open. She had finals to study for inventory orders, to process a life to continue building. But first, she opened a new document and started writing, trying to capture this feeling, this moment of standing on solid ground after so long in freefall. She wrote about the restaurant and Margaret's offer, about the months on the street and the terror of losing Sophia, about the custody battle and the triumph of winning. She wrote it all down, not knowing if anyone would ever read it, just knowing she needed to document this transformation to prove to her future self that it had really happened, that she'd really survived. Because someday Sophia would ask about these years. Someday her daughter would want to know where they'd come from, how they'd made it, what it cost, and what it earned. And Elena would show her this story and say, "This is how we survived. Not alone, but together. Not through perfection, but through persistence. Not because life was fair, but because we made it fair through community and courage, and refusing to give up." She finished writing as dawn broke over Chicago, coloring the sky in shades of gold and pink. Sophia stirred in her crib, making the soft sounds that meant she'd wake soon, hungry and ready for a new day. Elena saved the document and closed her laptop. Then she went to her daughter, lifted her into her arms, and together they watched the sun rise on a life they'd fought for, built together, and finally got to keep.